Like, were you kind of raising whilst you were still like looking for the first couple of deals? And
it's a bit chicken and egg, yes.
Yeah.
Because you go fundraising and they say, do you have a deal? You go and, search for the deal. They like, do you have the money?
Yeah.
So it's really chicken and egg.
Welcome to season 2 of the Found and Funded podcast, a podcast for searchers by search experts where we explore the route to business ownership without having that $1 million idea. I'm your host, Carl Lundberg, CEO at Gerald Edelman and founder of the ETA Awards. Let's get into it.
Man, that's deep.
I'm trying to be sort of delicate about how I
say it. No, it is. Yeah, it took a while to explain that.
That's a really interesting point, actually.
I thought hard for about 2 seconds and I'm like, nah, I'm good.
This episode, I'm here with Sergey Sushentsev, co-founder of Astra Holdings. Sergey, great to have you here. Really looking forward to having a chat. It'd be good if we could start by perhaps just hearing your background.
Sure. No, happy to be here and thanks for hosting me. So I started my career in McKinsey. So spent several years there, did lots of different projects, then decided to do a proper business education. So went to HBS, got my MBA there, then went back to McKinsey for a bit. And then I met with the founder of Rocket Internet, which is the startup incubator out of Germany. They were launching startups in Europe and emerging markets. So I joined Rocket Internet to essentially sell shoes online. And I thought, how hard is it to sell shoes online when, after McKinsey HBS? And it actually turns out that it's not that hard unless you want to make money with it. And if you do want to make money with it, then it's actually not easy. So spent 6-7 years with Rocket building e-commerce marketplaces in fashion, food tech, fintech, lived in and worked in Moscow, Paris, Singapore. And then about 10 years ago, moved to London. So been in London for about 10 years. And I joined what back then was BCG Digital Ventures, which was essentially a digital kind of innovation unit of BCG, standalone product managers, designers, engineers, and we were building products, services, businesses together with BCG clients. Amazing things. Really loved it. Spent there about 8 years. And then a year and a bit ago, together with Amit, my co-founder, we launched Astra Holdings.
Wow, amazing. That's a really interesting mixed background, right? And you've spent a lot of time moving
a lot of different, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, a lot of different things, yeah.
Yeah. And so I suppose you mentioned HBS. Was it there that you first heard about ETA?
Never heard about it, no.
Okay.
The first time I heard about ETA was probably a year and a half ago.
Right.
So back then when I was there, it was 2010, it wasn't really a thing yet. It was everyone wanted to go to investment banking, private equity, consulting. That's pretty much it. There were a few people dabbling with startups. But then when, a year and a half ago, when we started thinking about what we want to do next, together with Amit, then we learned about the whole ETA and started going this rabbit hole and found that there's a whole ecosystem. And so we're kind of late to that, but we loved the idea. So we decided, why don't we try to do something similar?
And we'll get into that in a bit more detail in a moment. What was it that led you to kind of consider what was next? Was it kind of a natural end to your journey at BCG?
Yeah, so a couple of things that I really like doing overall, which is learning and building things. And throughout my career, I've built different things in shapes and forms. And then when I joined BCG Digital Ventures, we were essentially building products and businesses, and there was a bit of consulting research up front, but mostly building and launching. I think towards the end of it, it was less of a build, more consulting. So I started thinking what I want to do next, and it was in a very similar state of mind. And funny enough, I wanted to build something with technology and with Gen AI, because we were building things with Gen AI back then, and Amit wanted to buy a laundry business. So you couldn't be, further apart. So we started discussing what we want to do next, and I had some concerns about the whole startup and Gen AI thing. He had concerns about laundry, and then we started thinking about how do we, combine the two, and hence, here we are.
And how did you and Amit meet? Did you already know each other long before that? Or?
Yeah, so he joined DV in 2017 or 18. So I interviewed the guy. So he joined DV, and then he launched Machine Max. So he built Machine Max, which is this IoT and AI industrial telematics platform for construction mining businesses. So he incubated it within DV, and then he went and was CEO of the whole business for about 4 years. Took it global and sold it to Shell. And then he came back. So I interviewed him again. So
and you let him back
we're joking that, so I don't learn from my mistakes. We hired the guy again. So he was a partner in industrials practice, and I was a generalist back then. And then I moved more to private equity practice. So that's how we know each other. So it's been 7-8 years.
Right, amazing story. That's really interesting, actually. And so so you wanted to do something else. You got talking about your things, and then you were like, right, okay, let's maybe find a middle ground between the two extremes that we're both looking at. And you said it was 18 months ago you heard about ETA. In what form? Was that kind of search funds in the traditional sense, or self-funded search, or kind of the Holdco type stuff?
So the whole thing started with, laundry business that Amit wanted to buy, and then I thought it's not ambitious enough. And he thought that the whole startup that I wanted, to launch was too risky in a way. So we thought, well, what is the middle ground? And then we thought, well, why don't we buy several businesses and use the cash flow to buy another and then reinvest and so on and so forth. And then that's how we learned about the whole ETA. There are several great books out there that we read, and they're like, oh wow, that's amazing, because we really like the the stability of this thing and this businesses and the cash flow, but we also want to apply the tech and innovation and bring that to this asset class. So we really like that combination. So we started talking to investors in ETA, and that has got us to the whole Holdco
kind
of idea.
Yeah, and so I suppose at some point in that process you were thinking, right, okay, so as opposed to, looking at Amit's kind of idea of buying this laundry business and say, well, let's just buy something bigger, it was a multiple, approach in terms of let's buy several businesses under some sort of Holdco structure.
Yeah, exactly. So we thought, well, what if we want to buy, 3, 4, 5 businesses? How would this work? And then there are a lot of holding companies out there. And we thought that, before we found out there are a lot of holding companies out there, we thought we came up with this brilliant idea of a holding kind of business model. And then we learned that, in Sweden, there are, 30, 40 of them, crazy number. So we started talking to different investors, people who've done this before and so on. And we thought, well, we really like this idea on a risk-adjusted basis. It's a really cool model. And there are several reasons why we like it, but that's one of them. So we learned quite a bit about all these holding companies and how they started and what they were doing and what worked, what didn't work. And then we thought, well, why don't we try this in the UK? So, yeah.
Excellent. So just to pick up on something you said there, when you said the risk-adjusted basis, do you mean kind of taking into account the reduced risk compared to a startup, for example, and then comparing the returns that are achievable? Was it to say that, based on the two variables, actually this is a sweet spot?
So, yeah. So, there's a lot to unpack there. So with this startup and with the tech startup, let's say, the problem that I had of going down this route is it might not fail quickly. So you might launch it and you might raise money and it's going well and the product is good, and then you hire more people and so on and so forth, and then you raise a bit more, and then 3-4 years down the road, for a lot of different reasons, it might fail. And then you end up going back to square one.
Yeah.
So that was my concern with the whole thing. Whereas if you go and buy existing businesses that have been there for 20, 30 years, and you help them grow, then 3-4 years down the line, you will end up with something that, like in the worst case, you will, have a business and either generates cash flow or you sell the business. So that's what I mean. And then we looked into ETA, and ETA is a great model, and we've met a lot of searchers, and I love this model. But we thought, well, in 7-8 years, we can actually buy a lot more businesses out there, and just ambitious-wise, we thought, well, why don't we try that? Because we have operated small businesses ourselves. Mm-hmm. We've done that before. So in a way, it's an evolution of that. Like, what is the next step for us?
Yeah.
That's how we came up with that.
Yeah, amazing. I find it fascinating. I think just to touch on one of the points you made there, which is, these stable cash flow positive businesses, even if it doesn't go as well as you might want, there's something there hopefully in the future. And I was talking to a self-funded searcher the other day who was explaining kind of the rationale for going self-funded. It was, well, I didn't feel comfortable enough taking other people's money, but I was comfortable with the risk of deploying my own money, and my ethos has been, don't fuck it up. And that's basically it. The reality is, if it's doing okay, you've got to do something very wrong, unless, you have incredibly bad luck and the markets turn, or some other kind of political situation causes there to be some downside, which of course could happen. But aside from that, things, realistically, if you leave it alone, it should do okay. And that is the beauty of this space, really, isn't it?
Yes. And if you leave it alone, it depends who runs the business. And I think it's very important, because I don't believe that you can just buy and forget. Mm-hmm. We don't believe in that. We also don't believe that in the Holdco model, at least, you buy and you run these businesses, because it's not scalable, and we're not there to tell them what to do, because they know their business better than anyone. Mm. But I guess the question is, where do you have, once the owner leaves of the business, and there's management, maybe there's not, where do you get the energy from to drive this business going forward? Yeah. Because owners have a different mentality and energy that they put into the business versus any manager out there. Yeah. And they can be brilliant, but it's just a different type of energy. Mm. So I guess the question is, like, where do you get that energy from? Mm. And if you can find it, that's amazing.
And I think there are, yes, it's about finding the right people, but it's also about making sure they're incentivized in the right way as well, isn't it? So, you're there for support and guidance and coaching, as you say. It's the evolution of your kind of operating experience, but you don't want to be hands-on running it, because, as you say, it's not scalable. You can't do that with 10 businesses. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And we've researched a lot of different models out there, and even holding companies, there are variations of holding companies, and there are pure decentralized holding companies like Rocco, for instance, that just IPO'd, and they buy businesses in B2B, B2C, and they leave them alone. There are companies that spend more time integrating businesses or spend time managing this business that they buy. So there are variations. We're kind of in the middle. So we don't buy and forget, but we also don't buy to manage the businesses. So we have our kind of value creation playbook that we've developed, and I can talk about that if
we'll come on to that if we may.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. The only thing I wanted to continue touching on here on the structure is, you and it may be a very simple answer, but you've kind of got, I think we've talked about before, ETA, which I guess encompasses traditional search funds, self-funded searchers, where the concept is that someone's going to go in and be Succession, really, take over and run the business operationally, hands-on, be the CEO. And often they've got a strategy to make some acquisitions for growth, but there's going to be some organic growth, maybe some acquisitions as well. And traditional or self-funded kind of both have the same approach there. Then you've got the Holdco, and you've kind of got the roll-up. And a roll-up, okay, particularly targeting a particular industry, consolidating that space, synergies, multiple arbitrage, that kind of thing, and normally kind of an in and out, roll it up, grow it, and exit, and happy days, everyone makes lots of money. And then you've got Holdco, and I suppose the Holdco, I guess, could also be split between industry specific, or even sector specific Holdcos, where you're buying businesses, not necessarily integrating, but targeting a particular space, or a much broader approach, which I think is probably where you guys are, right? And what was your thought process there? Did you kind of do an analysis of that?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of research on the types of businesses we want to buy and the sectors we want to be in. And we're not buying anything that is good, like some other holdcos out there. Because for some holdcos out there, the thesis is if the business is good, I'm just going to buy it and keep, cash flow compounding, which for some works. We decided to stay away from B2C because it's quite cyclical. We looked into more resilient businesses, so we focus on B2B. We're looking more into industrial space, technical services, building materials, and so on. So we're looking at very boring businesses that are quite niche, but very stable kind of growth, fragmented, where a local player wins versus national one. We look at businesses that are hard to disrupt from China, or technology cannot disrupt them really, can be an enabler but not disruptor. So that's the type of businesses that we're looking at. So it is quite broad, but it's also focused in terms of the sector, I would say.
Certain criteria that you want to look at.
Yeah.
And that generally means that there's certain sectors or industries that you favour.
Yep.
Okay. We talked as well, we've spoken in the past about, why you're doing this. I guess there's lots of different reasons to leave a job, I guess a fairly stable, well-paying career to go and do something more entrepreneurial. Perhaps you could talk to that point.
So it is a lot of stars need to align for you to go and do something on your own. And there's so many factors to consider in there, from where you at career-wise, age-wise, family, financial, like a lot of things, right? And then do you have a person you want to do this with, or you go alone? And so a lot of different things. And I felt back then that a lot of stars kind of align. So that's why we decided to do that. But roughly there are kind of three pillars to our motivation. So one is on a personal level. Both Amit and I have a very similar story to tell. So our parents had a family business back in our home countries that they ran for 20 years. So my parents had a toy manufacturing business back in Russia, in Siberia. So they were selling toys all over Siberia. And I left the country a long time ago and studied in the US and lived here and there. And at some point, my dad called me and said, "Well, son, are you coming back, to Siberia to run this business?" And I'm like, "I live in London." So I thought hard for about 2 seconds, and I'm like, "No, I'm good." And then, so my dad tried to find the buyer that he trusted. He couldn't. So he had to shut down the business, which was very painful to watch. It took him 2 years to do that. And Amit had a very similar story to tell. So his parents also had a family business. So we thought that, to the extent possible, we would love to help other families and businesses avoid that fate. So we started researching and then found that succession is a massive problem here. In the UK and Europe, average age of SME owner is 50 years old. So in the next 5 to 10 years, you will see 30-40% of all SME businesses go on sale. It's crazy. So there is a personal motivation and a story behind that. On societal front, succession, that's what we're trying to, help solve. And succession means it's not you want to buy the business and flip it. Succession is I want to buy the business and I want to make sure that I keep the legacy as much as possible, right? And that's why we're here for the long term, so we're not flipping businesses. And then there's financial motivation, obviously. If we do this right, we're going to make a lot of money for our shareholders, for our investors, and hopefully we'll make some money, for ourselves along the way.
Yeah. Excellent. I mean, I must admit, I didn't know the personal story, and it's really interesting to see. When I'm talking to searchers, I often talk about the succession issue and say, there's these owners, business owners, who have been successful, and because of that, their kids have been very well educated, and they've gone off and they've gone and worked at McKinsey, or they've gone into investment banking and things, and they're not interested in running a widget factory in Hull, or indeed a toy manufacturer in Siberia. So it's really interesting to see.
100%.
Yeah, to see that,
Yeah.
and I suppose I guess I really understand your motives there to kind of try to prevent that happening here, because I've heard people talking about good businesses all over the world, including your father's business, shutting down because there's no succession, and it's a real shame, because it's just such a waste.
It is, absolutely. And we've met so many owners that are in their 60s, 70s, and they have children, and and many of them say, well, I have one kid who is able but not willing. Mm-hmm. Another one is willing but not able.
Yeah.
Some are all over, the globe, and they're not even in the UK. Many of them are in London. They don't want to go back to Hull or whatever.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
Yeah.
You don't have enough institutional money flowing into these businesses because they're just too small. So we're looking at 1 to 3 million kind of EBITDA range, and there are not enough trade buyers as well. And there are searchers, but not enough searchers yet. So there's just a lot more businesses out there that are at risk of closing down. And there are statistics there that shows that by 2030, about 30,000 of the businesses will have to shut down because of succession.
Yeah.
It's just a crazy number.
Yeah. There will necessarily be an impact on the economy as a result,
absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. And that's why I think what we are trying to do, especially the types of business that we look at, they're all outside of London. They're all in the Midlands, and it's the kind of the heartland of the UK, industrial heartland. And we bring talent, we bring capital and innovation to this asset class that has been lagging behind in all of those things, and helping to kind of level up. And I think it very much aligns with the government goals as well, if you think about it.
Yeah, definitely.
What we're trying to do, because we're not flipping business, we're not in financial kind of business. We're there to help these businesses be there for the next 15, 20 years.
Yeah. And when you become the owners, that succession problem becomes yours, right? So you have to work and put in the effort to find a solution, to recruit the right people, incentivize them.
Absolutely. And the benefit that we have versus our current owners of this businesses, we understand that. We understand this problem, and we have time to prepare for that.
Yeah.
Whereas most of the owners that we speak with, they at some point realize, oh, what do I do? How do I sell?
Yeah.
And a lot of businesses, they fail to sell, not because they're not ready as a business.
Yeah. That's it, because they don't think, oh, how do I sell? Well, I need to get out. Hang on, let me fix the succession problem first. They think, I need to sell, let me sell. And then they go to sell and they can't sell because there's no succession. And
it becomes exactly. And they feel like the value they're getting is not enough for whatever 20 years, 30 years they've put into this business. So it's not easy. And the whole succession planning is nascent. So we'll have the benefit of understanding that, yes, we need succession and how do we plan for it and so on. But we have 15, 20 years to do that.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. So I think, just to get into a bit, then, you've made your decision, you're going to do a Holdco, you've got certain criteria that you're interested in. And presumably geographically, anywhere in the UK. Is that right?
Pretty much. We focus on England for now, just for logistical purposes. But yes, it is UK.
Yeah.
Generally, yeah.
Okay. And then you said, you went to investors who have invested in Holdcos in the past. What was that process, and what was your intention? What were your your forecasts in terms of the equity to debt mix as well, and how much did you think you were going to deploy, how long for, and there's a lot of things that are really interesting about when you're sitting there thinking, I'm going to do this, then how? You know, there's a lot to go through and plan. And
yes, there is a lot, and I think one way to do it is just start doing this. Like, you can think a lot about it and analyze, and a lot of smart people, but just go and do it. What we looked into is, what is the economics of one typical deal that we want to do in this space? What are the multiples, equity, debt ratios, upfront, deferred, and so on. Mm-hmm. And then if we multiply this by whatever 40 businesses we want to buy, what does that look like? And it changes over time because you need less and less equity going forward. But the typical structure is we look at businesses with multiples 4 to 5, 4 to 6. Mm-hmm. And then we use equity and debt. We typically pay 70% upfront, and then 30% is kind of deferred consideration over 3 years. That is the typical structure. But then, again, it depends on the bank, it depends on the seller, and we're quite flexible. But these are kind of roughly the terms.
Yeah. Okay. And would you mind talking through the kind of the fundraising process? Like, were you kind of raising whilst you were still looking for the first couple of deals? And
it's a bit chicken and egg, yes.
Yeah.
Because you go fundraising and they say, do you have a deal? You go and search for the deal. They like, do you have the money?
Yeah.
So it's a bit, it's really chicken and egg, especially when you're starting in the space. Mm. No one knows you. Advisors don't know you. All the companies don't know. Brokers don't know you. And they look at you like, why? Mm-hmm. Why are you doing this? You're like, you're so not from this space. You're so not from this industry. So do you have the money? So there's a lot of this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So our fundraising primarily focused on people that we know, that people know us, mm-hmm. and it's mostly trust-based.
Yeah.
So we told them about the model. We told them about the mission and why we're doing this. And that resonated with a lot of people out there. Mm. Because we heard, time and time again, oh, I know a guy who is a neighbor and he's struggling because he has a business or whatever. Oh, I know that. So everyone knew someone who was in a very similar situation, like, what do I do with a small business? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we raised from a couple of family offices, high net worth individuals that just know us. We work with them, and it's mostly trust-based. We spoke with a lot of ETA investors as well, mm-hmm. who get the model, like it, but it's not ETA in its pure form.
Yeah.
And there's not much flexibility on ETA investors because, and I kind of get it, like there are so many ETAs out there, like, can invest, get good returns.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
fine.
And also they that's the model. It's easy to just invest in the same thing because they know the terms. There's no negotiation over the terms. It's just cookie cutter money in.
Yes.
Terms of
yes.
All you've got to do is pick the right searcher, maybe,
yes.
and make sure you invest in the right deals. Yeah, easier said than done, of course. But this adds an element of just unknown, I suppose.
Exactly. Like, this model as a Holdco model is still relatively unknown or new. Like, when I tell investors there are companies that are, $10 billion, market cap and $5 billion, like massive companies out there, super profitable, crazy multiples. Most investors never heard of them. Like, most, they're like, what? And then you talk about the multiple expansion, that you buy these companies at, X, you sell them at Y, and they're like, oh, wow, okay. So, and they go and look it up, and they're like, oh, that's really interesting. So, so a lot of investors don't know. It's kind of under the radar, the whole thing. But once you're inside, it's like the whole ecosystem there.
Yeah. There's like a whole world devoted to holdcos and
exactly. And I'm sure it will grow. Like, in 5-10 years, everyone will know about it.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Yeah. And you mentioned there, buy at X, sell at Y.
Yes.
And you touched on it a bit earlier. The bit in between, the valuation playbook that you've got. How do you add value to these businesses? And you mentioned you're not hands-on. You're not in operating, but you are there to add value and support and help them to grow. So perhaps you could expand on that for us.
So I can talk about the value creation playbook that we have, and there are three things that we do with each business that we buy. One is professionalize. So a lot of these businesses, they don't have board, they don't have governance. They, if you ask them what is your 3-year, 5-year strategy, they have no idea. That's just not how they operate. They might have a budget for the year at best, like that is. So there's a lot of professionalization that you can bring just to make the whole thing more, stable. The other thing is incentivize. So typically, apart from the owner, management or employees don't have any stake in the business or shares in the business. So what we do is we issue growth shares to the management, and we actually want to go and issue growth shares to employees of the businesses that we buy, because it really changes mentality of all these employees, and this is something unheard of in this kind of space. Right, so they never have that, but that actually differentiates you as an employer on the market, because now you have shares. So we also putting together KPIs and metrics and linking them to bonuses, because typically they don't really have that. So end of year, the owner will sit down and just decide how to distribute bonuses, if any, to employees, right? So we putting together a bit more structure there. So professionalize, incentivize. And then there is the whole digitize aspect that we're really, really keen on. And digitize means there are all these businesses, especially in traditional kind of industrial space, they're lagging behind on digital innovation. Because there is no pull and there's no push. Right? Yeah. So owners are now looking for the latest technology out there to improve productivity. Tech companies not going after this SME business because it's just a hassle to deal with. They're small, fragmented.
Exactly, yeah, it's so fragmented, isn't it?
Exactly. So, and what we want to do is bring technology innovation that we know and understand, we've done this before, to this asset class. And there are a couple of things there. So there are a lot of things that we can do to increase productivity of those businesses, but also bring tech and innovation to their clients. And that's a very different thing. So, and there are some, off-the-shelf kind of table stakes that, like implementing CRM. Like a lot of this business don't have any CRM tools that they use, project management tools, building the website or customer portal. So these kind of things, which is, fairly standard. But then you can bring some innovation to their clients and bring digital tools to their clients to differentiate yourself on the market. So that's kind of what we're looking at in terms of value creation.
Yeah, and on that digitization piece, how much of that is going to be, and this may be a difficult question to answer, but how much of that is going to be possible to utilize across multiple businesses that you own? How much of it is specific to an industry or a company, and how much do you think actually you can roll it out to most?
So it's a good question. We're not customizing, or we're not going with every business to see, okay, what are the digital tools and how do we create new things? So we will templatize 4 or 5 things that we want to do with these businesses from the digital perspective, and will be relevant for all these businesses. So all the things that I mentioned will be relevant for all the business that we buy, no matter if it's, industrial doors, mechanical engineering, forklifts. So there are certain playbooks that we have that we will apply. There will be some customization, obviously, but most of it will apply to all of them.
Yeah, great. Okay. And then something I thought may be interesting actually is to talk through your origination process. I mean, obviously, we know the UK is very heavily brokered. Is there any proprietary outreach, or is it purely brokers and sell-side advisors that you're talking to?
So a lot of different sources. So one is business brokers. There are quite a few of them. We've started building relationships with them, and occasionally we get, some deals from them. There are local accounting firms, a lot of them as well. So they work with these businesses and market them, and sell them. There are a few listings out there or aggregators that we work with that send us deals. And then there is a buy-side broker that we work with that essentially searches for off-market deals for us. So on our behalf, they reach out to businesses and, so we get quite a few, leads from that as well.
Yeah.
So multiple sources.
Yeah. So overall, you've got a decent funnel coming through, and
yes.
As you work through the process, I mean, actually, it'd be worth touching on how long have you been running now?
So a year and a bit.
A year and a bit.
Yeah.
And you've done 2 deals.
We've done 2 deals.
But those closed within how long?
So those closed within, I would say, up to 6 months from signing.
Yeah. Okay.
Plus searching.
Yeah.
So it's quite a long time that we're trying to reduce that.
Yeah, absolutely. And what is it that's been the main driver, do you think, of deals being slower? I mean, I have seen in the market, mostly on our sell side mandates, I think over the last couple of years, we've seen things just taking a little bit longer. But are there particular things that you've now identified as, right, that's something that slowed us down, that's something we can work on to reduce that process?
So there are quite a few things that some we control, some we don't control. A lot of delays are caused by lack of data that is available on the company side. So when you want to do a proper due diligence, there's a lot of data that needs to be there, and many of this business just either don't have that or have it somewhere, but it's not structured, it's not put in place. So it takes a lot of time to get this. Many of this business also don't have a finance director. It's all outsourced. So there are so many parties that are involved in this business, and many accountants that work there part-time. Yeah. So if they work part-time, they can do this, they can review this Monday, Tuesday, but not Wednesday, Thursday, so you have to wait. And just the pace of things is just way slower than you would expect coming from large companies or London. It's okay, let's do it next week.
Yes.
You're like, no, let's do it. So I think partially it's that. Another cause of delay might be on the debt side, because there are a lot of different banks that we can interact with and work with. And it takes time as well. All of them have different processes, different questions, and just to get to, approval. There are a lot of interdependencies. You need FDD to be done for the bank to go and, to create committee, and they go to create committee, and you work for the deal on this deal for, 2 months, and then create committee says no. You're like, okay, now you go to a different bank. And then, so it's like that type of things that you need to kind of work on and streamline to make it more efficient. So we putting together the whole playbook of the things, that we need to do during the whole process, who are the advisors and parties we work with, and then where is the time that we can, speed up things. Yeah,
exactly. Okay, yeah, makes sense. And I must say, I'm not surprised to hear that debt factors in as one of the issues. Something you said there about the kind of the way, the speed at which things are done, because they're regional businesses, they're SMEs, they're probably owner managed. Obviously, it's probably very different to the environment that you and Amit are both used to. Is there going to be, you're digitizing things, you're modernizing, and there's going to be some sort of change management process required there, quite a significant one. Are you also looking to potentially improve, perhaps modernize or speed up some of the cultural aspects as well, to have these businesses operating more professionally? And I know you mentioned professionalization, but does that include kind of being more punchy, acting with a less kind of regional, slower pace, and speeding things up? I'm trying to be sort of delicate about how I say it.
No, it is. It took a while to explain that. So rule number 1 when we buy a business is don't fuck it up. Pardon my French. So that's number 1. That's number 1 goal. We buy businesses because it's a good business and we believe in the management that runs it. So that is the basis. So on a standalone basis, even if we don't do anything with the business, it should be a good investment that fits into our strategy, right? Everything else is incremental. It does help us with, making the business more professional, more efficient, better. But it should be on a standalone basis a good investment in itself. So I think that's where we're coming from. Now, all the digital things that I'm talking about, we're not rushed to implement them very, very quickly because we don't have limitation of time versus a private equity. So private equity buys the business. They need to do all these great things with it, sell it in 5-6 years. They are pressed on, by time. We're not. So we have time to do that. Second, it's very important for us not to impose things and and disrupt the culture. So we need to make sure that the management and the team, they're really on board with the things. And it takes a while to explain how it's going to benefit them. But once they, get this, then it makes it easier. And surprisingly, all these, teams that we spoke with and, these 2 companies that we work with, there's a lot of interest in bringing new things, new technology, new tools to help them. So what we found is everyone loves growth. And the more things you can do to help these companies grow, everyone is on board with that, right? So that's what we see at least.
Yeah. So it sounds to me like what I've written down is there's going to be an evolution in the culture driven by communication. So explaining this is the plan, this is what we want to do, and then incentivization. So saying, look, this is what we want to do, so that you're not imposing anything, but you're saying this is what we want to do. And by the way, if we do that, we're all going to win.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It will help you because of the growth shares, they are incentivized to grow the business. So, and we only helping them. So we bring new investment, we bring new tools. So we, hear very good feedbacks in terms of, let's do that. Let's try that. We're still kind of early days. But we really believe that, once we templatize that, it can be a real good unlock.
Yeah. It's a really interesting case study, actually, because I'd be interested to see how quickly value is created, given that you haven't got the time pressure that you talked about. I wonder whether, because you haven't got time pressure, actually it might happen quicker than it would if you were trying harder.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting thought. It might. So we'll see. I think value creation is, again, it's one thing that we're betting on, but the multiple expansion is essentially the biggest driver of returns in this model.
Okay.
And it's the multiple expansion that you bet most on, really.
And where do you think that's coming from? Is that coming from, I imagine, partly at least in scale? So as you become larger, the multiple increases. But is it also to do with margins, growth? Like, where do you think that multiple expansions? What are the drivers of that?
So one is, as you rightly say, scale. The second one is diversification. So if you buy one business and sell one business, still risky. It's like one business, management sector, geography. When you have 30, 40 businesses, it's, the risks going down because of that. But the biggest driver is actually compounding.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised how many, investors that we spoke with, it's something that a lot of investors, underappreciate the compounding aspect in this model.
Yeah, got it.
So, and that is something that for private equity, it's really hard to do because you cannot use cash flow for one business to finance the other.
Yes.
And here, you essentially generate cash flow to, reinvest in the business and then, use it to buy more businesses. Because essentially what happens is the cash flow that these businesses generate is more than they can process as an investment.
What do you mean?
So if I have a business that generates about $1 million of cash flow, and I take this $1 million and give it back to the business, say go and grow.
Oh, I see. They can't use it all, right?
They're like, I don't need $1 million.
Yeah.
I maybe need 200.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, spend $1 million. I cannot spend $1 million.
Yeah. So then either you return it to investors, in which case it's not compounding, or in your case,
I give them 200
yeah,
to reinvest, and I use the cash flow to buy another business. Now I have, after paying debt, time, adjusted, I have 2 businesses generating $2 million.
yeah,
So I give back 200 and I reinvest.
yeah,
If you do this multiple times over a certain period of time, it compounds.
That's a really interesting point, actually. Yeah,
You'd be surprised how many people that we speak with, and investors, they don't really, they haven't thought about it.
Yeah.
It's kind of an obvious thing, but you haven't thought about it. And once you start thinking about it, you're like, that's interesting.
Is that true even before you've removed the leverage that you've used to acquire it? So is it still producing excess cash, more excess cash than it can use to reinvest in it in itself, each underlying investment?
So the thing is, you buy it with debt. So initially you don't have $1 million of cash flow.
Yeah,
Because you have deferred consideration, you have debt. So it takes time, whatever, 5 years to repay the whole thing. And, and then you generate $1 million of cash flow.
Yeah.
Right? So again, time adjusted, this is the model.
Yeah.
Now what you can do is you can front load it with equity, buy a number of different businesses,
yeah,
and then essentially, repay the debt. And
yeah,
so if you look at holding companies that have done this before, and they've been doing this for whatever, 20, 30 years, you can buy one business, take equity in the first business, and never need equity again, but it will just take you longer.
yeah. Because I suppose also growth in, if your debt repayment profile was based on earnings today, any growth then becomes surplus cash, excess cash flow, and actually it's not as though, again, you've got nothing to do with that. You can use that to overpay the debt, presumably, in either that business or other businesses, and so actually you can clear the debt sooner if you've got growth and excess cash.
Yes, exactly.
Or deploy it into new deals with some additional leverage.
So essentially it becomes the game of capital allocation.
Yeah.
Because you can either reinvest, you can repay the debt, you can buy more businesses, or you can issue dividends.
Yeah.
And it's a pure capital allocation, and we can, because we have a lot of investors asking, like, are you going to start paying dividends? And we're like, well, we can, but then we going to buy fewer businesses, or we can use that cash to buy more businesses. And so it's that capital allocation there.
Got it. Amazing. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. I suppose then the natural next step then is to talk about exit and what that may look like. So you get from X to Y, and you're thinking about, right, what's the plan? What's the ultimate objective here? I think there's a few options available for a Holdco, kind of to get some sort of liquidity event for the investors and the founders. Not necessarily to fully divest, but perhaps you could talk through your thoughts on that.
So our vision is to get to the level where we can go and list the whole thing and go public, and that will create liquidity event. So we think about 7-year roughly time horizon. That's the agreement with the investors. If for whatever reason the market is not right or something, then one thing is you can sell the whole holding, including all your companies and everything, either to another serial acquirer or private equity. And there are examples of both that we have seen. So that's kind of the second. The third option is we can start issuing dividends and start repaying all investors the money with returns and everything, because the free cash flow that we'll be generating in 7 years is enough to get to very good returns. So these are kind of roughly 3 options.
Yeah.
that we have on the table.
And you'll just take it as it comes when you get there and see whatever the most.
For now, yeah. So for now, our goal, I mean, we're early days still, is we have these options, but for now we're just building the foundation of it.
Got it. And just a final point on that is, you mentioned something like 40 companies. Is that kind of where you think you'll be in, or you hope to be in 7 to 8 years' time?
We will be.
Yeah, you will be. Good.
Will
like
be.
to hear it. And is it 30? Is it 40?
40.
40.
Yes.
Excellent.
It is 40. But it's not 40 disconnected all over the place. It's 40 within the platform. So we're building several platforms.
Yeah.
The first one is in warehousing logistics. So we'll have, 8, 10, 12 businesses in that space.
Got it.
We're looking at the second one, which is building materials and services.
Yeah.
So there will be businesses with that platform as well. There are different business models within that.
Yeah.
But they will be still kind of connected. And then there are some other platforms we're thinking about. So there will be home for them within Astra, but again, it's not merging them all together, and it's not a roll-up.
Yeah, got it. Okay, amazing. Cool. So the final question, which is one that we ask everyone, is who has taught you the most on your journey? And it's a very broad question, and you can take it to mean whatever you like. It could mean generally in life. It could mean specifically in serial acquiring. In that world, but yeah, who's taught you the most in your journey?
Man, that's deep. So I would say people who laid foundations.
Yeah.
And it may be a very kind of cliche answer. I would say my parents. I'd say my parents, because they were quite different. My mom she's pushed me really, push the boundaries, go high, wings and stuff.
Yeah.
And my dad was very roots.
Yeah.
An
entrepreneur.
Don't forget where you are coming from.
Yeah.
So he was like that, grounding, but also the sky's the limit. I think that combination really helped, lay the foundation. So.
Excellent. No, great to hear it. Well, Sergey, it's been brilliant to have you on. I've really enjoyed talking about it. Honestly, I've found it incredibly interesting, and even though we've worked together, but I've learned a lot of stuff from you about your background, the plans, and serial acquiring and holdcos, and it's been really interesting. Thank you so much.
No, amazing. Thank you. I really enjoyed that as well.
Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Found and Funded Pod and LinkedIn at the Found and Funded Podcast, and comment on who you'd like to see us sit down with next. If you have any questions about what we've discussed today, drop me a message and let's have a chat.